Okay, let's get started here. Gary, are you there?
I am here. Good
Great.
day, everyone.
That sounds better. Welcome to Building a High-Performing Organization, a webinar put on today by Chris DeCenzo and Gary Polston from Growth Strategy Partners. We'll let you know we are recording this today so you can see it again later. If you do have a window on your right and you want to minimize that, there should be an arrow to do that, and you can see this whole presentation. First, we're very excited to put this on today. A very important topic, especially about building an organization, building your people. We all talk about how people are important and how the organization is important, but how do you do that? How do you make a high-performing organization? And Gary's going to spend most of the time today explaining a lot of what he's done in the past, things that he's applied, and show you how you can take your organization from being, maybe average or below average to high-performing. Today, just so you have a sense of who's here, we have representatives, I guess, from actually all over the United States. We have Canada, we have the UK, and we actually have Saudi Arabia. It's a good evening to you there in Saudi Arabia. Many of the attendees are presidents and CEOs, some on the sales side and some on quality assurance. We have companies that are the small side, say 20 or less, and we have some that are over 1,000. So it's a very, very broad audience. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to our first slide. And Gary, let's get going.
All right. Again, good day to everyone. What we're trying to do today is share the framework, our framework that we use, and the best practices for how one really builds a high-performance organization. And many of you may have watched the NBA Finals and saw the San Antonio Spurs just absolutely dominate Miami. And I think it's just a terrific illustration of how great teamwork, great execution can prevail over talent any day. And the same principles apply to our business organizations. And from my own perspective and through my own experience, it is really execution. It's execution that separates performance over time. What we've done here is on this chart is we've profiled illustratively the performance across all the players of an organization in terms of their profitability, and they range from marginal to top performers. This data comes from a lot of financial benchmarking that we do for clients. And a couple observations. One, what's always fascinated me is that the good performers and the top performers are just markedly higher, markedly better than the rest of the group. Secondly, and this is based upon my own experience, there usually is no reason why a company can't move from left to right. In my own experience, we've taken companies that were good and got to the top. We've taken a couple companies that were just average performers and reached the top levels. We've even had a couple that were marginal and been able to reach the very highest levels of performance. And the difference, of course, strategy is key and strategy is important, but the real key is how well an organization executes.
So anybody can get there. Anybody can do this. Is that right, Gary?
That is right. That is right.
So let's show them how to do this. Goals for today. We're going to share with you a framework that we've developed how you can strengthen the effectiveness of your organization. How do you take it from that average or below or even high to higher performance? And what are the best practices that you need within each of those parts of the framework to implement? The away from here and the value that I can add is, as an engineer, I've built 3 consulting firms, started Growth Strategy Partners in 2003, and we've gone through a lot of changes ourselves, and we've brought in good people, and it's helped make us successful, and we've done this with many clients. So we're doing this, 5, 6, 10 companies a year at least, and the application works. Gary?
I'll let you read my background. The most important thing about me is I played on a lot of different sports teams all the way through college, and I've always had a great fascination with how great sports teams are built. I mean, how do organizations not only achieve a championship, but are able to be there year in, year out? And in my career, I've worked with both McKinsey and then have had a whole series of different operating jobs. What we're going to present today is a combination of research, and I have to give certainly credit to McKinsey, who did a lot of research on what is an effective organization, but then try to blend it with my own experience and having actually done this. So it is not, it's just not theory. This has actually been proven in practice many times over.
It's a good thing. A little bit about Growth Strategy Partners. We're a consulting firm, management consulting firm. What makes us unique is the research we've done on what drives growth. And what we've been able to do with that is take that research onto what we call the 7 keys to growth, the tools and methodologies we built, and then the consultants in the firm, and apply that to your business and our clients' businesses to help them grow their revenues, their profit, and their talent faster and more efficiently than they can on their own because of the expertise we have. And we'll share a little with some of the success stories we've had doing this. Let's talk about high performance.
First, let's start with the definition. I mean, I struggle sometimes with the word high performance, but I've never been able to come up with a better term. But let me give it some definition. From my perspective, it's an organization which can consistently outperform its competitors, day in, day out, year in, year out.
Okay, and if they do that, here's a point I want to, I guess, add to this, because we talk about this not only in high-performance organizations, but relative to growth. Growth's relative, and it's relative to how your competition's doing. And I think one of the keys to take away today is the relativity to how you're doing with your competition. If you're growing 1% or 2%, which you may not think is good, and your competition is 3, 4, 5% in the negative, relatively speaking, you're outperforming them, you're doing better. So it's one of the themes that we're going to share about today. And Gary, this is that picture you had some fun with on execution.
It is all about execution. And what I love about this picture is you don't necessarily have to have the best equipment. You don't have to have the best facilities. It's all about the organization that you put together and how that organization comes together to work to make it happen. Chris, I think you had a poll that you wanted to just start with to get everybody engaged in the presentation. Yeah,
let's see. The question we'll start with is how would you rate, the effectiveness of your organization, the execution of your organization. Is it very low? So what I'd ask you to do is actually go click on a button. How would you rate yourself? How would you rate the execution effectiveness of your organization from very low to very high? And we'll share that with you shortly, because try to get a sense of where's the audience right now. We have with the very low end, average to high, and we'll share that with you. I got almost 70-something% voting on it so far. And when we're done, I'll share it with you, and we'll then move on. At least what the audience is doing. Okay, I'm going to take about another 10 seconds here. So if you'd click on an answer, and now I'm going to close it in a second, and you'll see how we're performing. Okay, interesting. We've got a higher than average response here. I'm going to close it, Gary, and I'm going to share it with you, and share it with everybody. don't you tell me what you see there, Gary, and what your reaction to that is?
Well, it's 83% are think they're average, 17% high. None of our audience seems to be struggling. They all think they're doing reasonably well, but that's good. That means there's opportunities to improve, and to me, there's always continuous opportunities to improve, and that's basically the culture that we got to start building within our organizations.
Well, this goes back to, if they're average, right, they've got some good foundations. They can take, we've got, 7 principles here, 7 elements, and, that's complicated, sophisticated, so those that are average or even high can take it another step further, which is great.
One of the things that we're going to share with them a little later on is we're going to share, we've taken each of these elements and we broke them into, 5 different levels of performance, so people can try to assess their own performance and see just where the gaps, performance gaps may exist for them.
So let's get into the meat, Gary.
All right. We've all been schooled in terms of how to think about competitive advantage. This is actually a chart out of Michael Porter, who was a professor from Harvard Business School, who was probably one of the great thinkers and original thinkers on thinking about competitive strategy. And he laid out this matrix in terms of, what type of competitive advantage do we want to build, and how are we trying to apply it in the market in terms of we competing broadly across the entire market, or are we just selectively focusing on specific niches. And he said there's only really 2 competitive advantages we can try to achieve. We can try to either be the low-cost competitor, have cost leadership in the industry, or we can be trying to provide better value. And I got schooled in this stuff, but when I actually started having the experience of trying to run organizations, I realized that it's a lot more than that. It's a lot more than just strategy. It really is about, in fact, it's almost all about organization. It's all about the type of organization you build, and what we tried to build in our organizations was our ultimate competitive advantage was going to be our ability to execute. We were going to be able to execute better than any single competitor that we competed with. And I used to use Vince Lombardi as the example of how you do that. I'd like to give you a couple examples just to highlight the type of results that can be achieved. This was one I spent 12, 14 years with SROC. This is a medium-sized construction materials company. I shared a couple quick starting points where we were. In 1992, we were about $300 million, and we were losing $30 million in cash flow, EBITDA, a year. And 10 years later, we were $630 million in revenues, but more importantly, we're $150 million in profit. And sure, we had some good strategy, but it was all done with organization. It was all done with constant focus on execution. That level of profitability, to just give you a reference point, was we had 2 sister divisions over in Europe, both of which were twice the size we were. We were the North American subsidiary, but our profitability was equal to theirs. So it was quite an accomplishment by that team. This is another example. One of the elements that we're going to talk about quite a bit today is integration or employee engagement. How do you get that whole organization to work as one team? How do you get everybody involved in the process of improving the organization and improving the company? And this is sourced out of Gallup. They did a study of firms that had highly engaged workforces, which were people that are really participating in the process of improving the company, versus those that were in the bottom quartile. And the results are just stunning in terms of the comparisons. Whether you're measuring basic operational measurements in terms of absenteeism, turnover, shrinkage, quality, safety, or external measurements in terms of customer satisfaction, or ultimately your financial performance. Getting that whole organization involved is absolutely critical. All right, let's go to the framework. One of the issues is, what is organization? And many times when we think organization, when I work with many clients, some of them stop at just structure. Do I have structure, or maybe do I have the right people, do I have the right capabilities? But it really is much more than that. And from our perspective, it consists of 7 elements that have to be addressed simultaneously and have to be addressed together. And it's structure, it's capabilities, it's integration in terms of how it works together and how it comes together. It's your administrative processes in terms of how the organization actually works. It's the type of KPIs and feedback systems and analytics that are used to help the organization calibrate where it is, the values and culture, and the execution itself. And for each of these, what we're going to do today is we're going to delve a little deeper and go into some of the best practices that make up these areas. This graphical image is used to convey a couple different messages. Number one, that to really get there, you have to work on all 7 at the same time. I mean, I've worked with some organizations or some clients that have come in and they may be at a high level of performance in terms of their capabilities, but are really struggling with processes. And because of that, their organization is not performing very well. The other thing is that obviously execution is the centerpiece. That is what we got to focus on. And finally, to really achieve it, we need to have congruence. Congruence across all the elements, and all the elements obviously in support of the strategy that we're trying to pursue. All right, let's go through them.
Sorry, Gary, I like it because it's, as the engineer, you talk about people, you talk about an organization, there's now some definition, something tangible as to what do you look at? How do you make a high-performing organization? And the fact that it's now in a framework, and there's 7 pieces to it, and again, we'll show them, not only what the ideal state should look like, but what are the best practices to get there. I think this is great, and I hope they, they gain from this.
Yeah. One other point. One of the things that I always very much believe in is that you've got to begin with the end in mind. You have to know where you want to be before you can start to move forward to try to get there. And in keeping with that, one of the things we're going to do is that for each of these 7 elements, we're going to try to define what we think is the ultimate standard of what you're trying to aim for. And then based upon that, then we will actually start to go in some of the practices that you need to work on to try to get there. All right, let's start with structure. The structure is not the hardest one. It's actually the easiest one, although I've seen some people struggle with this sometimes. But it just needs to be designed to support the strategy and to support effective execution. It's basically functionally trying to define the way your organization is going to work. And I've put together just, a classic functional definition. As organizations get bigger, we have somebody here who has 1,000 people in their organization. As they get bigger, they get more complex. Sometimes you need to create more complexity in terms of the structure, in terms of matrices, but that's matrix organizations, but that's not the focus for today. I really want to focus on the other elements, which I think are more important. One of the problems with looking at an organization just functionally is how do you get the functions to integrate? How do you, and particularly as organizations get bigger and bigger, how do we make sure the left hand is working in congruence with the right hand? But with regard to structure, I mean, the basics are it needs to be, number one, supportive of the strategy, obviously where we're trying to go. We have to be organized in a way to support that. It has to be organized in a way or structured in a way that supports the nature of competition. And by that I mean I've worked with some clients who lean toward a much more centralized organization, but competition is very local, and you can't manage that, you can't manage that with a type of central or type of structure. It needs to be much more decentralized in terms of how it works. And as organizations get much more complex, you need to come up with a lot of different organization devices, which I'm going to talk about in integration, with how you manage complexity and how you bring it all together. But the basics are just make sure it's clear, make sure it's well defined, It's clear in terms of reporting relationships. It's clear in terms of responsibilities and accountabilities. It's clear in terms of the authority limits, and it's clear in terms of how the decision-making processes are going to work. And those things are obviously encapsulated many times in position descriptions. But this is not where people stumble. I mean, this is the, it's not hard getting structure right, but what is hard is how you get the organization to integrate itself. Capabilities. The definition or the standard I like to use is an A or B player in every position. That's a very high standard, but of course I ask myself, why not? Why wouldn't we want every one of our customer service people to be able to perform at an A or B level as a customer service agent? Or why wouldn't we want every one of our salespeople to be able to perform as an A or B player as a salesman? It doesn't mean that the salesperson can be the CEO of the company. Hell, he may never even be able to be a sales manager. But in that territory, our company is really only going to be as good as that salesperson is. So every person needs to be an A or B player. And that's not the way people think. And a funny story, when I first joined SROC, this was the graph that I was presented by our Senior Vice President of Human Resources. And it basically said this is the distribution of our people. We've got 5% of our people are A players and 10% are B. And most of them are average players, and that's what we need to do in terms of managing the total compensation pie and so forth. And I said this can't be. I said no wonder our results are just average. We need to rethink the way we're doing things, and let's talk about how you go about that. First of all, it starts, I think, with the guiding philosophy, and that is that your employees are the most important thing you have in your organization. GE used to have that phrase that employees are our most important assets, but it is really true. An organization, sure, we may have terrific facilities or terrific technologies, but it doesn't happen unless we have a terrific organization. And many times, sometimes when I work with entrepreneurs, they're used to having built the organization and they're still driving it like when they started it, but it has to turn upside down at some point. It really has to be investing in the people to make them as skilled as they can be. A lot of people that I work with say, well, Gary, we can't afford that. How am I going to put all A players in the entire organization? It's not affordable. And actually, I don't think that's true at all. It doesn't mean that we're hiring the absolute best person available. It means we're hiring for the position. We're hiring for the right type of attitudes, the right type of capabilities, the right type of growth potential, and we can train and develop the people from that point on. I've rarely met a person that did not want to be a member of a winning team, and that really gets back to leadership and how we develop our people and how we train them. And in developing them, I think one of the things that we used to do is for every position we define the different levels of standards. What was an A person going to look like? What does that A salesman in that particular division going to look like? Or what does that technical service person or the person that's managing the distribution facility, what are the skills and capabilities that define an A person? And then a B and a C and a D. And then we used to, obviously we know where all our people stood, and then we'd work on training them, coaching them, and developing them. Not everyone gets there. But if you really focus on it and you spend a lot of time in developing your people, it's amazing how many people do. The other thing that is critical is the feedback systems, the positive reinforcement systems, the recognition systems, the reward systems. In the organizations that I led, in base compensation, we never paid more than market. Sometimes we might be in the third quartile a little, but it was all performance-based, and it was all based upon a lot of recognition, and people really started to believe they were part of a winning team. And that was more important to them than making a lot more money than the next guy. Now, sure, in terms of performance compensation or variable compensation, if we were doing extraordinarily well, then we did, we shared that generously with the people, but it was all based upon performance. But in the end, as I said, there is no reason why you can't have an A or B performer in every position. The one exception I make is the leadership team. And in my own experience, I don't want any of the people that are members of the leadership team to be less than an A player. And sometimes if it took me 6 months to find the right person, that's what we had to have, because A people hire A people have A-level standards. If you hire B people, well, they hire C people, and God help us in terms of what the C people we're going to hire.
Gary has high standards. That's a good thing. I'll also share, as an example, there's actually 3 just recently, or maybe not recently, the last year, clients of ours where they did not have the A or B players, especially on that leadership team. And some of the smaller businesses out here may be saying, well, that's great, Chris and Gary, but some of those B or C players are family or relatives or been with me for X number of years, and how do you deal with that? So we had 3 situations. One was owned by 4 different people, and the person that was really bringing it down was one of the owners. And after a lot of discussion and debate about you can't necessarily fire an owner, well, we did help that person retire a little earlier, moved in a new player, and that business, that profitability has gone about 4 times higher than it was when that person was there. Another client of ours had someone in the position for a long time, good, dedicated employee, but was just really at the C or B level and kind of close to retirement. And again, we helped them retire a little earlier, brought in an A player, and this company here has gone from financially 0.5% operating income to last month they did over 9%, and the owners are extremely happy. And there's other cases out there. We've just seen where, especially with the people side, if you get those right people and the impact they can do, and we're talking about the financial piece, but there's morale, there's just more excitement, and just a great place to work that adds to that. So just some good examples of where this is actually translated into real solid profits on our side. Let's go on to the process side.
The standard is very simple, is efficient, reliable, standardized processes. Again, when we draw up an organization, we're looking at the organization vertically in terms of its core functions, research and development, supply chain, production, distribution, marketing, sales, finance, service. That's the core functions of the business, but it's not the way the business actually works. Businesses truly work horizontally through processes. Some processes are very simple. In finance, closing the books is a self-contained process within finance. They understand it, they can measure it, they know how well they're doing at it. Similarly, your sales process is something that the sales manager is responsible for. There's not any other functions that have to be involved with that. But other processes are much more complex and cut across multiple functions. In terms of some examples that we threw down here was the new product development process, the order fulfillment process, the procure-to-pay process, supply management processes. And this is where I see a lot of companies get in trouble. I most recently was working with in fact, they had asked me to come in for a year to try to help turn this company around. It's a $400 million distribution business. And it had been 5 acquisitions that they put all together, and process-wise, they had broke the company because as they started to centralize certain functions, the processes didn't work anymore. And it was really one of the keys that we had to work on very quickly to try to elevate the performance of that company. But we have to think both horizontally and vertically at the same time, and the key is those processes. And let's just talk about it just a little more. One of the things that always fascinates me is that when I work with different organizations is there are no measurements of the process. We don't know how the process is performing. We don't know what the quality is. We don't know what the reliability is. We don't know how fast it's working. I mean, when we think about a manufacturing process, people think that way, but when we think about administrative processes, few firms have actually taken the thought process to that level. Second piece of it is who owns the process. One example in that distribution firm I was working with, one of their core processes is ordering equipment. This is an equipment company, and then of course getting it ready for the customer, and then moving it out to the customer. In a small business, that process would take maybe 4 days. In this company, that process had moved out to as high as an average of 25 days with a high of 42 days. You can imagine what that does to your cash cycle. But nobody owned the process. A very complex core process, but no one was responsible for it. And of course, you have got in that business, you had every function involved in that process, yet those functions couldn't come together to work on the process. So some of the best practices, I think, is number one, somebody has to own it, clearly a member of the management team or executive team. And then second, it has to be also a team that's responsible for it, with members from all the different functions that are going to participate in that process. In terms of standardization, I think perhaps some people are aware, you got to map the process, and you got to step back and try to, is this the optimum design for this process? Can we improve the way the process works? How do we marry our systems with the process? Once we get to a reasonably optimized design, then we need to document it. We need to stabilize the process. We need to make sure that it's standardized and we are constantly doing things all the time the way we're supposed to. One of my clients was a construction company, and this is a $20 million company, but when he started it, this is the way he thought, and he laid it all out. And he had this wonderful book that laid out the whole process and all the steps and what everyone was supposed to do, but that's not the way they managed the company. And so as this company grew and it got a little more complex, it was taking on many different shapes depending on which area they were working on. And obviously he was not very efficient anymore. So again, standardize it, measure the performance, put the metrics in place, make sure we got the feedback so we can see how we're doing, and then obviously that team that's assigned to it, that's responsible for it, is responsible for continuously improving the performance. All right, integration. Again, a very high standard. An organization that works as one seamless team across all functions, across all processes. And this is a great illustration of a football team, the coaches, the players walking hand in hand on the team. I mean, they are really symbolically one team. And as organizations get bigger and get more complex, this is one of the most difficult things there is to try to accomplish. So let's go talk about some of the practices, if you will, and some of the keys that are necessary to do this. First of all is alignment, and this is the alignment at the senior team level. Do we all know where we're trying to go? Do we have a plan? Do we know what are the roles of each of the function in terms of executing that plan? If that senior team is not on the same page, then obviously one function starts moving away from another function. The other the keys, the organizational devices that I referred to early in the presentation, is just an extraordinary use of teams. I think at SROC, which we're only a $600 million company, we had at least 25 or 30 permanent teams in terms of how that organization used to operate for different processes or different things we were trying to accomplish. But first of all, it starts at the leadership level. That leadership team has got to be just that, has to be working as a team. It has to be meeting regularly. It has to have its plan. It has to know where it's trying to go. It has to know exactly what each other is supposed to do. And similarly, as you move down toward functions or processes, they, again, need to have their teams. They need to be working as teams. Obviously, a process team doesn't show up in the organization, on your vertical organization, but is very critical to how you manage specific processes. And then finally, what I'd call some specific issue teams. And let me try to make this live if I can for a second. When we were working at SROC is a big, we were in the cement business, chemical business, different construction materials businesses, and we had a central functional organization for the core businesses. Some of the specialty businesses stood as standalone divisions. One of the things that we were really trying, in terms of transforming that company and in the way it worked, was we were trying to focus on customer satisfaction, something that the industry had not really done a very good job of, and we wanted to transform our customers into raving fans. But that's not something we could have assigned to the manufacturing department, or we can't assign it to sales and marketing, because everybody is involved in it. Everything counts. And so the way we tried to deal with that is that we formed customer satisfaction teams at each plant, which really operates as its own region, and everyone was a member of that team in terms of the manufacturing people, the sales people, the technical service people, the logistics people, customer service people. Anyone that had any impact on customer service, they worked as a team to optimize it. We had constant feedback coming back from the customers. We even had customers participating on these teams to make sure the voice of the customer was there. But it's those teams that made it happen. And in a functional organization, we never could have gotten there. So it's a great organizational device in terms of how you unify your organization. One of the other things that I think is just paramount is employee engagement. And I don't care whether it's a small organization, mid-sized organization, a large organization. The more that we can get our people involved, the more that we can push responsibility down, the more ownership that we can build in the organization for results, the more we can involve our people in the process of improving the company, the better the performance. And that's why I wanted to use that Gallup survey, because it is just so striking in terms of the results, and it works. I mean, people want to be part of something, but they have to be involved. If we're just sitting there directing them and telling them what to do, then we're really not getting the benefit of what they can contribute. And finally is communication. I can't stress this enough. I mean, if we're trying to build one seamless team, you can never communicate too much. It is just critical to how you bring everybody together. Chris, you want to take the next one, which I think is KPIs and feedback systems?
Let's talk about KPIs, key performance indicators. This is something, we're talking about a high-performing organization, but we're talking about even running a company, and somewhat surprised how often we see organizations without some basic reporting. The ideal state, or the current state, is kind of flying, or in this case, driving blind. No indication of where you're going, how you're getting there, your speed, your direction. So, how many of you have this as a situation, not having the information at your fingertips, or heck, at the fingertips, at least at a report, to tell you how you're performing? Now, in the ideal state, yeah, you would have what we're calling as a dashboard, some robust, easy to use, very visible metrics and feedback that tells you how you're doing. It would be nice even if you had some spreadsheets or some basic reports, and we all have probably the financial reporting. Everyone is using that. Sometimes there's companies that are still checking their bank account to see, how we doing. Most of them have some financial reporting, but the real successful organizations have taken that beyond just the financial and got into the operational, got into the people side, get into culture and values. And that's what, from a best practices perspective, the first thing is, what should you be looking at? As a definition, what's important? Ideally, you want to have your key performance indicators, your KPIs, linked to the strategic goals of the business and strategies to see if you're achieving what you set out to do. And from there, you may have a robust financial reporting package. Something that doesn't take 2 weeks to get out at the end of the period, and so you're 2 weeks behind, you really can't impact that following period. And some databases, whether that database is a spreadsheet. Many of our clients, we've been putting in basic spreadsheets to collect those KPIs. And from there, we'll put in these performance dashboards. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate. You don't have to actually buy software. You can get pretty sophisticated with the spreadsheet tools and create some basic reports and some visual metrics to see how you're doing. And you start getting these trends because it's trending. It's not about this period and the last period. It's really a point in time. It's understanding how you're trending over a longer period of time. The client we talked about earlier that's gone from this 0.5% to a 9% operating income, we've got 1.5 years of data since we've been there, and it gives us great indication now. We're actually trying to we've dropped it's a company that processes their product in pounds, and we've dropped it 10 cents here and so forth. We're down into the pennies and half pennies. And that's how tight we're managing it now because we're there. So having these KPIs and this management report is then a must if you're going to build a high-performing organization, because it helps you understand at the strategic level how you're doing, but actually down at the individual level where you can actually pull this data off the machines and see how an employee is doing on a minute-to-minute and hourly basis. So that's the KPIs and management reporting. Let's talk about culture and values. Gary, back to you. Actually, sorry, before I do that, I wanted to do a poll here. Because we were curious on, where's my poll button here? We're curious on how often or how robust the measurement systems are of the organizations that are listening in today. So the question that we have for you, we'll look for a poll responses, which of the following do you use on a regular basis, the following being a reporting or dashboard tool? And you're starting from the entry point from financial reporting up to operational, so you're getting more sophisticated as you go down the line. So if you would click on which one or which any of these that you're using, that would be very helpful. Are you using financial reporting? Are you using operational reporting? Are we showing that now also, Gary? Is that, let me see if I can see that poll being here. The poll's up there. Okay, good.
Yeah, it's there. It's there.
There we go. Have you got into the organizational reporting or cultural and how well you execute? The bottom is what we call that general performance dashboard to a more strategic goals dashboard. So take another 10-15 seconds. Most people have already responded to that, and we'll see basically at what level of sophistication do we have companies using these KPIs and dashboard tools. We got everybody done here. I'm going to close this up, and you can see, Gary, what the answers are. And I want you to give me your reaction here as you see this in terms of where it starts and where it ends.
Well, as you would expect, everyone's got financial reporting, although it's not 100%, which is fascinating to me. And it depends on, obviously, the robustness that they're using. But as we go down the list, less than half think they have really good operational reporting. Only 14% are really measuring their organization. And that's very, very dear to my heart because, again, it's very simple. What gets measured gets improved. And the more we measure things and at down to a level of detail that we can operationally improve it, it's important. And everything is measurable, whether it's culture, whether it's how well you're executing, whether it's your financial or operation side. And the other thing is the dashboards, and you need both. Dashboards quickly tell you where you've got performance issues and where you need to delve deeper. Obviously, the managed reports take you to a level of depth that is required to really dig even deeper. But at least if I look at this, a lot of opportunities for people to, one of the elements that they should be working to improve.
It supports a lot of what we see. Most of them have the basic financial reporting. As you get more sophisticated, they have less of it. All right, let's move on. We got a couple more slides we got to get through so we can get to some Q&A. So let's go to the culture and values.
Culture and values. One of the things I want to stress is that there's two sides to an organization. And move it back one slide, if you could, Chris.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you. There's the hard side, and there's the soft side. The hard side is our financials, is our metrics, our key performance indicators. It's all the hard things that we measure in an organization, and that we're all reasonably good if that's what we look at. But the other fascinating thing about an organization is the soft side, which is the values, the beliefs, the attitudes. If I leave, if I'm the president of the company and I leave and everyone's there by themselves, what are they going to do? How do they act when I'm not there? What do they feel? When they get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, are they excited to come into work and excited about what they're a part of, or is it just a job? And the soft side, many times, is more important than the hard side. I've seen organizations that can get to high levels of performance if they work just the hard side, but it's very difficult to sustain it. If they manage the hard side and the soft side simultaneously, it's a lot easier to get there. A couple quotes that I think are terrific. First is from a guy named Lou Gerstner. He was the former CEO of IBM. Was brought in when IBM was really struggling, and he was the one that led the transition from hardware to software. His quote from his book is that culture isn't one aspect of the game; it is the game. Because in the end, an organization is no more than collective capacity of people to create value. Lou Gerstner, I was actually at McKinsey when I was there, one of the brightest guys that ever came through that company. And one of the other things he said in this book is, I used to think it was strategy and finance. And not till I got to IBM did I really come to realize that it was culture. Everything was culture. The other guy, Dan Dennison, I'm not sure if too many people will know Dan. Dan is probably the foremost researcher and writer on culture and how to measure culture. He's got some very innovative ways of how to measure culture of a company. And one of the quotes from his book that is either you manage the culture or it's going to manage you. And as I was discussing with a client that I was working with the other day, and I said, each person that you hire, this is actually a $20 million company, not a very large one, but I said every new person you hire brings his own set of beliefs, his own set of attitudes, his own set of values into the organization. If you don't manage them, if you don't know what you want the organization to look like, then it's going to take a shape that is not something that is going to fit where you want to go. So very, very important. The ideal state that the standard that I like to use is that we got well-defined values, well-defined culture attributes. Again, begin with the end in mind. What do we want it to look like? And then it has to be consistently led, consistently reinforced by the leadership team. This is one of the most important things that leaders have to manage is the culture of their companies. Everything you say, everything you do counts, and it's very important to understand that. So in terms of best practices, again, be very explicit. What do you want it to look like? What do we want the values of this organization to consist of? And go beyond that in terms of the cultural attributes of the company. Secondly, the leadership team has got to walk the talk. I mean, you can say it, but like little kids are going to not listen to what you say. They're going to watch what you do. And if you don't reinforce it, if you don't live it yourself, then it's not going to happen. If the leadership team embraces it, then you can cascade it down through the other levels of leadership until you get all leaders, all middle managers or senior managers with the same belief systems and cultivating the organization the same way. And finally, I think it needs to be measured. again, you as you walk around an organization, you certainly have a sense of where it's working well and where it's not working well, but there are innovative ways now available to measure culture, particularly as it drives performance, and it should be measured, and some of the best leaders today do that, so they constantly know where they are and what adjustments they have to make as they're going forward. All right, finally, execution. Again, being a sports guy, I love sports analogies. There's a football play that gets diagrammed, but the key to the great football team is that they can execute that play day in, day out. Vince Lombardi used to say, they know what we're going to do, they know what we're going to try to accomplish. They're not going to be able to stop us because we can execute better than they can. It's as simple as that. But when you draw up a play, what happens in your organization? Does it unfold exactly the way you drew it up, or does it perhaps unfold like this? I don't know if you guys remember these old little football games that we used to be a lot of fun, but look what's happening. One guy's going to the left, another guy's going in circles. This guy's not doing what he's supposed to do. It's amazing that you made any progress down the field. And
I used to love these games.
It's a funny way of looking at it, but if we don't work day in, day out on execution, that's where we end up. And whether it's big companies or small companies, I see it all the time. And so what I'd like to end with is just focusing on how do we get great execution in of itself. And again, it starts with where do we want to go? What's our plan? And every year that plan, it doesn't have to be the entire business plan, but there's a new operating plan that's needed. What new products are we trying to introduce? What new markets are we trying to add? Where are we trying to go with this sales territory? What costs are we trying to do and reduce in manufacturing? What new processes are we trying to redesign? What is our plan for moving the organization forward? What new capabilities do we need to put in place? That plan gets converted into a set of actions, and it gets converted into a budget or a financial plan, which I'm sure many people have for their organizations. But do you also have the actions? Because the actions, and do you have the metrics of how you're going to measure the performance? Because what then needs to happen is that gets converted into management objectives, what everyone's objectives, what they need to accomplish this year, and then their performance incentive plans need to be linked to that. So we have congruence all the way through the system, from business plan to financial plan to the annual objectives that people have to how you're going to compensate and motivate and reward your people. And finally, it just doesn't happen by itself. It's what is your management operating system? How often are the plans reviewed? How often do we compare performance with what we were supposed to get done with what we're actually getting done? And that is one of the most critical things. That company that I worked with that I was just spent a year on trying to help put back together, there was no ownership for results anywhere in the organization, and there were no plans. I mean, it had really just gone adrift, and we had to change some leadership and some other things. But the next thing we worked on was really trying to get this in place, trying to get a basic plan in place, not a very sophisticated one. Let's start moving forward. Let's start understanding, get the organization used to executing again. And then every month, even though we had 40 branches and 3 regions, every month I spent time with each region going through performance. And every branch manager had to get up and discuss performance and start to rebuild ownership. And that company very quickly went from losing money to becoming profitable and having a new foundation to work off of. All right, Chris, I'm going to turn it back to you.
So we're going to take questions in a minute. We've got just a few left, so we'll try to get through the summary here. And if you have some questions you'd like to ask, we'll try to answer those. If we don't, we'll get them responded to you later. I think what we were trying to share with you today, is the benefits, but not only the benefits of a high-performing organization, but how to get there. I think we do understand that the high-performing organization, not only gets you more engaged employees, it gets you basically higher profitability. And we've got stats now behind that to support that if you do generate this high-performing organization, you'll get engaged employees, higher customer satisfaction, and ultimately higher profitability. But it does come down to beating the competition. So, as we had some scores here of average to above average, those average respondents, if they can step that up, they'll be beating those that do not get better. Because it ultimately comes down to, are you beating the competition? You do better than they are. And I also like to share with you that, there's 7 elements. There's now been defined this high-performing organization. What does that mean? There's actually 7 elements, and you've got the ideal state in each situation and the best practices. So it's now a framework on how to take your organization from where it is today to a high-performing organization. Now, I'm going to do one more poll, and then we'll take some questions. So I'm going to ask you the last poll, because we're always curious on, going forward, what are the challenges you may have implementing a high-performing organization, building a high-performing organization. So I'd ask you to answer this poll. What's going to be your top 2 challenges? You have 2 answers you can put here. Everything was starting with my list. I've already got it on my list. Where do I start? How do I proceed? How do I get the management team bought in or committed? Maybe it's the A or B team players, changing the culture. We've identified a few that we think are going to be some of the challenges. And so if you just take I'm going to do another 15 seconds here on what are your top 2 challenges you're going to face trying to implement a high-performing organization. And when we're done with that, we'll take some questions. And then we're going to wrap this thing up. Let's see what we got for time. Oh, well, we don't have much time. We're actually going to run out of time for questions. So once we're done with this poll, if you want to submit your questions, we'll have to answer those through email. Because I do want to wrap up and get everyone ready for their next meeting. So let's see. What are the challenges? We're going to close this up. I got about everybody voted here. And I'm going to share this with everybody to see. And I'll let Gary, you comment on this. What are the challenges they're going to face?
Well, interesting, very interesting. One says, geez, we're already too busy. I mean, we got enough going on. How am I going to find time to do this? And understand that. I hopefully in this presentation we could underscore for you just how important it is. I mean, in my time when I was leading different organizations, it was probably the most important thing I did was trying to make sure that we built this type of organization, and particularly when I was even running an entrepreneurial-based company. Second one is, half the people said change the culture. Understand, and I can't answer that. I mean, I agree. It is, but it is amazing, to really transform a culture, it takes 2 or 3 years, for sure. But to start moving it, it can move within a month. And all I can say is that, again, you got to, step back and say, where am I today, and where do I want to be, and then start to work that. And I'd be more than happy to, if people want to talk deeper about that, because it's one of the things I think I'm pretty good at is really how do you transform cultures.
So let's just move on. I just want to close this up, Gary, before we run out of time. We will answer some questions that people have submitted, but we just can't do it right now live. Where are we? What do you need to do? We've shared with you, how do you develop and build a high-performing organization? We've given you the elements. You have all the answers. You just need now to commit to doing this. And again, this is one of these things about committing to doing it better and faster than your competition. We'd suggest you evaluate, how effective are you now? Where are your challenges in these 7 areas? identify where to get better, where's the areas for improvement. What changes can you make now? Look for that low-hanging fruit, quick wins. Everybody likes a quick win, but will still build momentum so that you can build the larger change, let's say, going forward. As Gary mentioned at the time, things, whether it be around the structure of the organization, roles, responsibilities, or even some metrics. The thing we're going to emphasize, obviously, is where do you need help, and go get it. Whether you find some peers in the industry, you hire some phenomenal consultants like Growth Strategy Partners, or reach out somewhere. But if you can't solve that problem, you should go ask for some help. Now, we'll help you a little with this, which is, the worst thing you can do is nothing. Always got to remember to add that. But here's a little starting point. And yes, it's going to be a little tough to read, but when we send you the presentation, you'll be able to evaluate yourself on the 7 elements here on the left side and a level of performance across the top from low to high. And again, what we usually see is companies in the average 2, 3, 4, little 2s and 3s, maybe a 4 or 2. If you're getting those answers, you're going to be average, just like you gave yourself a score earlier. The question now is, how are you going to get better? What are you going to do to get better? So this hopefully will help you with as a self-evaluation. We would obviously be happy to take a phone call if you just want to call us and ask, where do we start, what do we do, how do we go? We'd give you some advice. Maybe we can help you, maybe we can't. More likely we can. But we also have an assessment, and we can tell you how we can come in real quickly and give you a self-evaluation from an independent perspective, an external assessment on where to get started and actually help you build that plan. And that's kind of our, one of our taglines is that we can get you results faster than you can your own, because we've done this, we know how to do this. So I'll leave you with that. Here's our contact information. I'd encourage you to reach out to myself or Gary with any questions. Gary, you want to add anything here at the end?
No, not at this stage. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today and spending an hour with us. And we hope we're able to add some value, stimulate some of your thinking, and help you on your journeys.
Thank you again, everyone, very much. We'll get you the presentation hopefully before Friday. If you have any more questions, please give us a call. And thank you very much for listening to us, and look forward to some more webcasts, and look for actually some more articles on this topic in the next few weeks. Thanks again.